Welcome to another episode of Embrace the Suck. Today I have Carlos with us, currently a staff in COIC and RSS somewhere. Keep that out of the no one needs to know, right? But welcome to the show, man. I really appreciate you taking the time out of your day to come out here because I know as much as anybody that a Thursday night you either just made phase line or missed phase line. You've got numbers to turn in for tomorrow. There's a whole lot of stuff that you could be doing right now, but you're taking some time out to be with us and to be on this podcast. So I just want to thank you first and foremost for that.
Well, thanks for
So yeah, thank you so much, man. So just give us a kind of a rundown. How long you've been on the duty, and just who is Karos, and we'll go from there.
all right. Yeah. So basically, I graduated from recruiter school 8 months ago. And as soon as I checked in, I was made a staff in COIC and of an O&2. So essentially, brand new recruiter. And my recruiter is also brand new. So we're both learning as we go. It's been brutal, but at the same time, we've learned a lot. We've come a long way, and seeing the impact that we have on the kids up here is phenomenal because a lot of them don't have options. And no matter how hard the duty is and how hard the grind is day by day, both myself and my one recruiter, we keep that in mind and we just keep chugging along and trying to keep that positive mental attitude.
Wow. That's so. First of all, I'm glad that you started off with that, because that's a huge part of the issue that I have with a lot of people is that they don't look at it like that, right? They don't. And I saw your Facebook status you made the other day, which was I was like, wow, this is gonna be a great topic to talk about. But a lot of people don't look at it like that. They don't look at it like, hey, listen, man, like, yeah, this is a hard duty, but we're changing the lives of Americans. Like, we're changing the lives of people and cultures and generations, and people just don't think about it like that. So I just want to thank you for starting this off like that because it's an amazing reality that like we get to do this. It's a gift that we get. Like, and people don't think about it like that. They're like,
Mhm.
"Oh, bro, I got a history of going recruiting duty." It's like, dude, you get to be the spokesperson for the Marine Corps.
Yep.
Like but no one thinks about it like that. So one of my first questions really would be, man, is excuse me, is how did it feel? Like, did you know when you left BRC that you were coming out here to be a staff at COIC, or they didn't tell you that?
I found out, I think, 2 or 3 weeks before graduation. We received that phone call from the sergeant major, briefing us on where we're going. And I was expecting to, be a regular canvassing recruiter. And, some things happened. One thing led to another. A new RSS was being stood up, and one of the recruiters was relieved. And, I was the best person for the job as far as they were concerned. Not sure how the picking went, but I was a little shocked, as you could expect, to hear that I'm going to be a recruiter and a boss.
Yeah.
The learning curve was immense. The first 3 or 4 months were brutal, absolutely brutal.
Yeah, and I can do that. I can only imagine that because like I remember being like I had an advantage. I'll be real. A lot of people get mad and they talk crap about it, but hey, listen, I'm a reservist, so I had an advantage before I went to BRC. I had already been on the streets for about a month. I
Hmm.
had background. I was a recruiter's assistant for a while. So when I got into BRC, like everything that was, I was never taught like legitimately MC3 skills, but I watched it and listened to it enough around the office that I knew it.
Hmm.
So when I got to BRC, it was very, I wouldn't say easy for me, but I had already conducted interviews. I already had NWAs. So for me, it was just like, I'm here because I had to be here type thing. So it wasn't a learning curve for me. I actually had a lot of disagreements with my BRC instructor because
Yep.
one, I just honestly thought he was trash. And so a lot of times I would look at what he was doing and I'd be like, that doesn't even make sense. And me and him, actually, I had a lot of closed door conversations with him, and he would tell me, like, listen, man, nothing you know is to leave your lips and go to any of my students was is what he would tell me.
Hmm.
Um, but so I guess one of the questions would be is that so you came out now when you came out on the duty, were you already a staff sergeant?
Yeah.
Okay. So do you think that the Fleet Marine Corps could have prepared you any better for this shock at life? Or do you think that like you were that BRC and your Marine Corps career prepared you as best as you possibly could before you got out here? Like what are your thoughts on that?
So to be upfront with you, I haven't been in the fleet for like 4 years.
Oh
Before
wow.
I was on I&I duty. Um,
Oh, so you were on I duty. So okay, that'll be another question that I ask you, but wow. So that's a whole oh my god. So you went so how so okay, I guess this is a multi-layered question.
yep.
How was I&I duty for you? And have you felt that being on I&I duty has helped you with recruiting duty? Because I would feel that it would help you a lot with like the KG mission and stuff like that.
So I mean, I&I, it was its own world in comparison to the fleet and recruiting.
Yes.
I will say I prefer recruiting over I&I.
Oh,
Um,
really?
for 100%, 100%.
Really?
Um, the workload in I&I was there were some days like sure you're getting off at 1600, and there's some days where you're working both ends of the candle, you know, and it's one of those things where how do you say this? It's going from the fleet to I&I and being in charge of not only your job but then five, six, seven other collateral billets.
Yeah.
Was
And then
pretty
funerals, toys for
yeah.
tots.
And honestly, that's the reason why I prefer recruiting over I&I. The funerals, we averaged 10 funerals a week for only 8 staff members. It was pretty bad, and not just that, but the Keikos. Telling a loved
Yeah.
one they lost their Marine, that was hard.
Mhm.
And that's one of the primary reasons why I prefer recruiting, because here you're telling them that their child now has an opportunity and can better their life. Whereas on I&I duty, you're telling them that all their opportunities are gone because they no longer are breathing. And
Mm.
it's
Were you personally involved in the Keikos?
yeah, a couple of them.
Oh wow.
Yep. Um, and it's definitely an eye opener.
Yeah.
Um, and as hard as recruiting is, I keep trying to
Mhm.
keep it into perspective. Like look at where I came from, and I learned a lot in I&I. If it wasn't for I&I would not be anywhere as sufficient as I am, because a part of my job was the Toys for Tots coordinator. So I was in front of the public a lot, speaking to
Yeah.
people. I already knew how to talk to civilians. Whereas
Mhm.
if I came straight from the fleet and I spoke like a Marine, that'd be hard. But huge
Bro,
advantage.
you know what? I've never brought this up in the podcast, but I think that that's something that the Marine Corps should strive a little harder at. Is that part? Is
Yep.
like because people talk about that all the time. It's just like, bro, when I come, the first problem you have is going from active duty to now being in the civilian world where you got to talk to people like normal
Yep.
human beings, right? And I think that's like I feel like that's something that the Marine Corps should kind of try to do a little bit better
Mm-hmm.
because that's a huge even if say you don't get off the Marine you don't get out of the Marine Corps. I'm sorry, say you don't go to a B billet, but you get out of the Marine Corps. Now
Mm-hmm.
you have these corporals, these sergeants that are getting out of the Marine Corps with no understanding on how it is to get back into the real world and speak to normal life human beings. Because even myself, like even though I was on recruiting duty for 4 years, and I was a reservist, like I'll still find myself now in my civilian job just saying things that like they're just like, wait, what? Like there's still that culture shock. And I
Yep.
feel like the Marine Corps doesn't do a good enough job of it and at least training these Marines and not just the Marine Corps, but staff NCOs, sergeants, senior
Mm-hmm.
leaders. I feel like they need to do more when it comes to public speaking. Like you shouldn't, public speaking and these different things, they should be more these are things that should be learned at different courses and stuff like that. I feel like, I know that there are things implemented, but I
Mm-hmm.
feel like they're not implemented enough. And that like Marine Corps recruiting duty shouldn't be the first time you're introduced to speaking to the civilian populace.
No, it shouldn't. And you're right. I think the Marine Corps, in some cases, does lack a little bit there, but they are also making improvements. And
Yeah, of
I
course.
mean, I've been in for about 10 years now, and I can say from my first year to now, I notice a difference.
Oh yeah, greatly, greatly, definitely.
Like the way that Marines communicate with each other now, I would say is more professional.
Yeah.
You know, it's more of a two-way conversation, and not so much like you're going to do it. Of course, there's situations that call for that, but I do think that the Marine Corps is going in the right direction.
I agree. I definitely agree with that because it's become more about communication. Because and I was actually having this conversation earlier, a couple of weeks ago with one of my gunnery sergeants, and and I had said the same thing. I was like, we grew up in a Marine Corps where it was just like parenting, do as I say, not as I do,
Mhm.
or hey, when I tell you to do something, you do it right now. You don't question me, right?
Yep.
And now the Marine Corps, I don't want to say it's changed too much, but now it's not that these Marines are questioning, it's that these Marines just wanna understand, and it
Mhm.
was the same thing when I was a young Marine. It wasn't that I was questioning why I had to do this, but when you have an understanding of why you're doing something, you
Mhm.
understand the mission more, you understand what's going on more. You have an understanding, you care more, you have an understanding of why it's important this happens, and then it's also you have an understanding of why it's important that we do it this way.
Exactly.
And back in the day when I was, junior Marine, Lance Corporal Bennett, in going to Afghanistan, if I asked that question, it was like, hey, shut the F up. You need to just listen and do your job. And it's like, but what if you had explained to me why we do it this way? Like,
More of a
hey, why did you not do it this way and you did it this way? Oh, well, it's because you learned 16 times not to do it this way. And while
mhm.
I understand that I still have to learn on my own, but if you've already learned it, you can also explain it to me and explain, hey, like we don't do it this way because, and it's like the same thing with my children. Hey, I don't just tell my son, hey, don't jump off the flight of stairs because you're going to get hurt. I explained to him, hey, we don't do that because you can go to the hospital or because you walk down the stairs and you hold the rail or like we explain things to understand. And I think that's a huge part of what you're talking about now,
Mhm.
with the Marine Corps being where we are, is we're very different in leadership traits. We've grown and we've also realized that there's not one type of leadership, there's multiple different types.
100%. I think what you're saying can dramatically apply to recruiting duty. Because, for instance, I use communication with my recruiter. If I'm like, hey, you can't leave until you have what you need for tomorrow. And he, of course, it sucks, right? Because you want to go home, you want to sleep, you want to see. But like when you explain the why behind it and you like break down things for them to see it, they understand, and they're like, oh, I get it. You're just trying to make me successful, and
Yeah.
and that's a huge part of it. I think is communication. Um,
100%, bro. I really agree with you on that
mm,
because I can speak from honesty from here. I remember when I first got on the duty and I was a brand new sergeant. I had just gotten promoted to sergeant, so I literally came out to recruiting duty as a sergeant. This was like my first ever leadership role, being an A gunner and stuff like that. And well, I mean, as a sergeant. And for me, no one explained like my first staff in COIC. I'll be completely honest. Well, the only staff in COIC I had, he didn't explain things to me. He
mhm,
didn't explain how numbers worked. He didn't explain why was it important to close out your month in sight. He didn't explain why was it important to, you know, have take one stands. He didn't
yep,
explain why was it important to, have contact cards. Like
mhm,
none of those things were explained to me until, hey, we have an SRI tomorrow. All of this stuff's got to get fixed. And it's like, well, if you had like when I became a staff in COIC and I went to this course and I learned all of this stuff, I was like, bro, at the time I had already been on the duty for 2 years. And in my mind, I was like, this stuff that we're learning at staff and COIC course, I should have known 2 years ago. Like if I knew all of these things that were supposed to be done,
mhm,
like like the 7 duty responsibilities of being a staff in COIC, like all the training that I'm supposed to be receiving. Where the hell was that at? Like there's so much stuff that you're like, wait a minute, I'm supposed to get this, I'm supposed to get this, I'm supposed to do this, and there's just so much lost in translation.
Mhm.
And a lot of times it's because we're not doing proper turnovers. We're not doing proper training. Like like for instance, yourself, I don't know how it went. And clearly you can speak on this for us, but when you became the staff at COIC, did you get a did you get a turnover? Like, did you get a good like left right seat like for a good couple of weeks to get an understanding of what was going on, or were you just like? Because me, when they made me the staff in COIC, like it was at first it was going to be, hey, we're going to make you a staff in COIC in a couple of months. We're going to have you go here and shadow, da 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 da. And then all of a sudden, dude gets a DUI, and they're like, hey, August 1st, you're taking on a mission letter the day you get promoted to staff sergeant and go. And
Yep.
I was like, what? I was like, I have no idea how to be a staff in COIC besides this 2-week course that I just took.
Mhm.
And that's all I know.
So I guess to answer your question, the sector I took over was gapped for 4 or 5 months before we got here. Um,
Wow.
had no turnover. Um, a great RI shop, and they have helped. Essentially, the staff in CIC that was 2 hours away from me did his best to train me up. You know, Skype, phone calls, visited from time to time, but no, I didn't really have a left seat, right seat. Like everything was trial by fire, and basically just seeing what worked and going from.
Mm,
And when it comes to training, it was difficult because my guy was just as new as me. How do I give validation to what I'm trying to tell him? And that was hard. Thankfully, he's a very mature sergeant, and
mm,
he understood the situation we're in. Very,
yeah.
very cooperative, I guess you could say. And he understood.
Yeah.
"Yeah, I know as much as you, but I'm trying to train you the best I can." And for a while, training was just us listening to each other TC, going out ACing together, and poking holes in our methods and talking about how we can make it better. And that kind of makes me want to go back to, you mentioned MC3, and I want to say, like, to maybe new recruiters looking at this is, don't listen to people saying that MC3 is garbage, because it's not. I think MC3 is the science.
Bro, if you, I will, I gotta, I want to interrupt you. I'm sorry. I'm telling you this right now. I agree with you wholeheartedly because people that say MC3 is retarded are people who do not know how to use MC3 accurately. It is
Exactly.
not that it's retarded. It's not that MC4 is retarded. It's not that it's some crazy speech. It's some crazy methodical thing. No, it is literally a proven thing that has been
Mhm.
proven to work. I use it in my current job as a civilian. I have friends of mine who literally modeled their entire real estate agencies off of it. It is literally something that literally one of the best things the Marine Corps ever went and did. And yes, it is. Yes, come if you're not someone, and this is my wholehearted, like this is my opinion, and I'm not saying this because I have someone was like, bro, you're like an advocate for 12s now. No, I'm just a common sense person. In
Mhm.
my personal opinion, if you do nothing besides use MC3, you should be able to write at least one contract a month at minimum.
Yeah.
Like that's just, and I say that because I've watched one of my best friends who was he's a Mexican dude from LA, has the thickest accent in the world, and you could not understand him half the time. But that dude did MC3 and was a motivated, dedicated sergeant. And
Mhm.
his rules at life were, I'm a sergeant, I cannot fail. He never wrote less than one a month.
Mhm.
And English was literally like broken English. His English was broken, and
Mhm.
all he used was MC3 and Gunnery Sergeant Bastalone as his mantra.
Mhm.
And it's just I completely agree with you.
Yeah, and Is MC3 going to suck the first 3 months? Yeah, because you only know the science. But as you fall into that groove of recruiting and you start applying your own art to it, it will wholeheartedly pay tenfold. Um, it's just, I think it's a crucial part of recruiting. If you just go into it and completely throw MC3 out the window, you're not going to make it.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. No, 100 I completely agree with you 100%. And I think it's because the people who say that it doesn't work are the hard-headed people that don't want it to work.
Yeah.
Like they just don't like honestly, like if you and I get it. I get that, I understand that BRC is like another Marine Corps school where we push everybody through, nobody fails, like because literally nobody fails BRC. Like even if you failed BRC, you're passing BRC. Like let's be real here. Um and that's the thing, is that I think there's just so many people that don't there's just people who are bitter towards 8412s and bitter towards the recruiting duty because of what they've been told. And I've
Yep.
related it to, like before in other podcasts, I've related it to the essentially, in my mind, it's when a Marine joins the Marine Corps, they have no idea what their MOS is, right? They don't know what they're doing besides they know the number and they know what they've heard of it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Once you become an 0331 or an 0311, you become indoctrinated into the, hey, that person's a pogue. That's just something you become indoctrinated into. Before that, you never knew what that even meant, and it meant nothing to you. But as you go along, there's this mantra, there's this identity in being an infantryman where anybody else is just a pogue, right?
Mm-hmm.
So in my mind, there's now, after all of these years, there's, if you look at the Facebook page that we're both on, there's guys coming on, that are like, hey, recruited in 1989 and recruiting duty sucked then, and now I'm going to talk about how much it sucked. Like, bro,
Mm-hmm.
you're still talking about how bad something sucked 30 years ago? Like, we're like, really, bro? And
Yep.
that's the problem, is that we've created this idea, this indoctrination that recruiting duty has to suck,
Yeah.
that it has to stink, and then that 8412s are all horrible people, and
Mm-hmm.
that you know what I mean? And this is just something that's been created over the years.
Yep.
And it's like, well, maybe that's not true. Maybe MC3 really does work. Maybe there's a reason, why, like Gunnery Sergeant Flores, he's a freaking, I don't know if you know who he is, but he has a PhD. He is a real estate agent, and he also just became recruit. He was recruiter of the nation, and he just became drill instructor of the year
Mm-hmm.
for all of the Marine Corps.
Mm-hmm.
So, and he literally talks about how his now as a real estate agent uses MC3 still. So,
Yeah. I
the
mean,
proof is in the pudding.
yeah, I would agree. And one thing I also want to say is, when I came onto recruiting duty, I was terrified of the command, and not in the sense of like, you know, of whatever, but like just because you hear the horror stories. You hear commands out to get recruiters, and the RI shop is just there to document training to RFC you, and that's not the case. At least in my experience, right? Um, I have a great command, and they have fully showed that that is not what recruiting duty is about. They're there for you. And when it comes to 12s, you know, I have a lot of respect for them. Like, they volunteered essentially to take a mission letter for the rest of their career. Like, I couldn't do that. There's no way. I'm
Yeah.
doing this for 8 months, and I'm like, whew, two
Yeah.
years change, right? But
Hmm.
yeah, it's big, and all I could say to people is don't listen to the gripes about recruiting, because it is what you make of it. That I do believe. You know,
Yeah.
do you sometimes have a boss who maybe doesn't do what they have to do? Yeah, but at the same time, just do your best to change lives, and don't forget
Yeah.
that's what you're doing, because you will find that recruiting is very rewarding. You know,
Yeah.
um, literally, I sending shippers and contracting kids, and they're all like, "Thank you, and for giving me an
Yeah.
option." And for listening to me and listening to what I want and need. And when you hear that little bit of appreciation, I guess you could say, it it makes all of the sucky parts of recruiting just not matter. And,
100%, man. And for me, I agree with you. And one thing that I always tried to explain to people and implement, at least when I was a staff in COIC and to my recruiters, was just I always hated when I heard people say, "Oh, my recruiter lied to me."
mm-hmm,
So I made sure to do my damnedest and
yep,
not lie to anybody
yep,
because I'm a reservist. So eventually you're going to come back to New Jersey and I'm going to look at you and say, I told you so.
mm-hmm,
So I would ensure, and I just like doing it because I'm like, listen, you're not going to be this person who's on Facebook saying, oh, the Marine Corps recruiter lied to me and here I am years later. No, like I'm going to make sure that you understand what you're signing up for. And if you have any questions, I'm going to answer them.
mm-hmm,
And it's because a lot of people, the reason why people hate this duty is because it's not the duty. Like the okay, so the duty is a hard place to be, right?
mm,
But it brings out the nastiness in people.
yes,
Like and people don't want. I saw this on the Facebook status the other day, and it's like people don't want to admit it. Like, bro, no, recruiting duty literally you find out about the amount of dirt bags there are surrounding you in the Fleet Marine Corps.
mm-hmm,
Like you get stuck in an office with 4 to 5 other Marines every single day.
yep,
You start finding out about the guy who doesn't change his clothes. You start finding out about the guy who doesn't clean his car. You find out about the guy who never gets a haircut. You find out about the guy who doesn't shave and has to be told to shave, even though he's a sergeant. You find out about the guy who can't do anything on his own and has to have someone constantly there to help him.
mm-hmm,
And then you turn around and you ask yourself, how the hell did you make it to the rank of sergeant and or staff sergeant?
100%,
And that's the part about it that people get so mad about, is that it's not that recruiting duty sucks, it's that you just got outed after 12 years, 13 years, 14 years in the Marine Corps. You
mm-hmm,
just got outed. And and not to be that guy because I really never talked about it, but if you think about it, all across MCRIC, you hear about cases after cases after cases of all different things, dipping in the pool, DUIs, all this different stuff, right?
mm-hmm,
Those, and the first thing that always comes to my mind when that happens, I had it happen to one of the Marines after I left in office. It was a guy who just checked in a couple of months in, found out that he was trying to dip in the pool,
mm,
and my first thought was, this dude's a staff sergeant in the United States Marine Corps, has been in for 12 years. My first thought was, what the hell has he been doing for 12 years that no one caught him doing?
yep,
And that's the thing about it, is that like it's not that the duty's hard, which I'm never going to say it's not hard. It's just that people don't want to admit that recruiting duty opens the world up to freaking dirtbags.
yep,
Like you will quick, like if you're somebody who's not a good leader, somebody who doesn't care about other people, somebody who doesn't care about the team, the mission, and all that stuff, very quickly you're outed.
mm-hmm,
And that's what a lot of people just don't like about it. People don't want to be honest with themselves and be like, wow, you know what? This shit is hard. And for some people, it's the first sign of adversity they've ever seen in their whole career.
yep,
And that's the other thing too, and that's also why it's a B billet, and that's also why it has the highest amount of people who get promoted when they leave the duty,
mm-hmm,
because it's not, I'm not going to say it's better than drill instructor or harder than the other one, but realistically the numbers have proven that more people leave recruiting duty and get promoted and or get promoted on the duty.
mm-hmm.
And if you really just look at the duty, it's a rewarding duty. So my question for you would be, at this point in your 8 months of being on the duty, what are some of the stressors that you've encountered, especially being in the position that you're in, and then how do you deal with those stressors?
Man, there's quite a few. I mean, you name it. NWA's flaking, appointments no showing, um, parents refusing PC. Like it just goes on and on. But for me, I think the primary stressor is you talk to a lot of people and you hear some incredibly sad stories. And I'm not going to give any names on this, but this morning I had a very emotional call with an active cop. and she said she's worried that her son can't join the Marine Corps because the dad no longer has custody. Because it was found out last night that he was sexually assaulting this kid's older brother and younger brother. And how do you deal with that, right? Like, it's still bugging me right now. But I think the best way to deal with it is to continue pushing forward and to just keep trying to change that kid's life. And I
Yeah.
mean, for PT is huge. Like, I you got to make the time for PT because that is my mental place. That's where I mentally de-stress. And if you don't make the time, you're not going to have the time. Whether it's at 05 or 2200 a night, try to get that in there because just getting out, getting a good sweat in, just helps so much with relieving the stress that you might encounter during that day. And I mean, you saw it in my post as well. Like the the guy I just shipped, living in a shed, after being sexually assaulted. Like, come on, you know, you don't. What is that? That
Yeah.
doesn't. That's not. When it comes to the Marine Corps, we're used to, like some of us, like quite a few of us come from hard backgrounds, but like we're used to being Marines and used to being around quality people. And
Yeah.
when you hear stuff like that, it kind of like wrecks you a little bit
Yeah.
because just like during package prep for that kid that I was talking about this morning, the dad was in my office and he shook my hand and he acted like a normal, loving dad. And how do you compartmentalize that and de-stress from that and defuse what you're feeling? Because I'm telling you, as soon as I heard that on the phone, this instant red. I was like, what the heck? You
Yeah.
know, I'm still trying to figure out how to de-stress from that one. But yeah, just hearing some of the stories that these kids have is heartbreaking.
Bro, and,
And
and that's and I'm glad that you I don't want to say I'm glad that you bring that up because it is a hard subject, but this is something that I haven't really talked about on the podcast yet, and that's the truth of it is that, like, number one, nobody talks about the amount of anxiety, depression, stuff that you deal with as a recruiter and or a staff and COIC.
mm-hmm.
And something that I've always wondered, and I'm gonna actually have an 8412 Master Guns on here soon. And one of the questions that I have is like, dude, they've been dealing with it for years. Like, think about
Yeah.
the amount of conversations or stories or poolies that they've lost or Marines that they've put in the Marine Corps that have passed away, or like there's so many stories out there of all of these different. Like, I know myself, I had a poolie, I had just met her,
Mm-hmm.
and about a month into me being in the staff and COIC, she passed away in a car accident. And I was literally trying to get her to direct ship to get her out. And unfortunately, the job that she wanted wasn't available and we couldn't get her out. And if she had shipped early, she wouldn't have been dead. Right. And
Yeah.
those are all conversations you have with yourself. Like, you're like, dude, what could I have done? And stuff like that. And it's like, and then you also have the same idea, like, and I've said this before on the podcast, like, bro, when I got that call that this female had died, there was a moment in time where in my head I was like, who am I going to get to replace her? Like, immediately my first thought at 3 a.m. in the morning was, I need a shipper.
Mm-hmm.
And then immediately as I thought that thought, I said to myself, Doug, what the fuck is wrong with you?
Yeah.
Like, somebody, like, literally as that thought left my mind, I stopped for a second before I called the sergeant major, before I called the CO. I had just gotten off the phone with my recruiter, and I just stopped and I prayed. And I prayed for her, her family, her family and everybody that knew her. And then I asked God for forgiveness because I literally just had the horrible thought. But it wasn't because it was a horrible thought. It was because at that time in my life, that was the anxiety and stress that I was under, was that was going to be the next question from the command. Like,
Mm-hmm.
hey, reach out to the family, condolences and all that, but hey, we still have a ship mission to make, right?
Mm-hmm.
And these are all things that we live with afterwards, right? The
Yeah.
people that you're meeting. And that's the thing about it too, that nobody talks about, is like, you got to think about it, man. How many people do you talk to a day?
Oh, so many. I mean,
Right? Like,
yeah.
whether it's your CO, your commanding officer, whether it's somebody in the command, a recruiter, a Marine, just people on the street, or anybody, right? How much do you not have left by the end of your day? You don't want to speak to anybody because you've probably said thousands of words in that day,
Mm-hmm.
and you just get so stressed out, and now you're also holding in these stories that people are telling you. Like, like I had the same thing. I had a Marine who's actually right now at OCS. But same thing. I met him, young man. He was the first interview I ever had that bawled out in tears for like the entirety of the interview, and cried about how his father used to beat him, about how his father used to beat him and his mother in Peru, and how they fled here to America so that he could have a better life, and how all he wanted to do was be successful for them, and how he could never forgive his father. And like that's just one story of the all of the people that I had that joined the Marine Corps and now are in the Marine Corps, or the people that got out and got kicked out, right? And in all of this, a lot of the time you feel part of it, right? Because now you are a part of it. Now this is something that's been passed on to you. It's in your mind, it's in your head. Like you're saying right now, like how do I deal with this? How do I get through it?
Mm-hmm.
And it's I'm not sure if you are a spiritual man, but I would definitely say give it to God. Even if you're not, give it, give it to him, and definitely, pray for that young man, and in hopes that things get better, later on in life for him and his family, and that things get better for his father. And, the whole thing is just sad, right? But so now you said the gym and stuff like that. Now, how do you think and I think you said this before, that you said you had a really good RI shop.
Mm-hmm. I do.
Okay, so you would definitely say that they've done the best that they can and or better for helping you grow and prosper as a staff in COSC.
100%. I mean, I am about 4.5 hours away from my RS.
Oh
And
wow.
so, I mean, for them to take a trip up here, it's it's a lot. Because I mean,
Wow. Bro, I want you to know something. I want you to know that I wholeheartedly feel for you right now, because I don't want to know the I don't want to know the heart pain or the heartache you wake up with in the morning, because I don't know what I would feel like if it was me and one other recruiter 4.5 hours away from the RS, alone, like literally no other Marine in sight,
yep.
and you don't have not I don't want to say you don't have enough training, because you're saying that the command has done as much as they possibly can with being as far as they are, but you're in a knife fight, and
Mm-hmm.
it in my mind you're in a knife fight, but you just have like two chopsticks.
But yeah, I mean,
Like they gave you the chopsticks because hey, this is all we have right now, and now
mm-hmm.
you're just whittling them as 8 months goes on. Soon enough they'll get sharpened enough. So
Mm-hmm.
because like bro, I don't know how I give you all the respect in the world, because I don't know that I would have been able to do that. Like my RS wasn't my first R my first when I was in my first RSS, my RS was 15 minutes away. My second one, I was I think an hour and a half,
Mm-hmm.
and I lived 15 minutes away. So, but wow, dude, wow. So so do you? I feel like you do a lot of Zooms and Skypes and stuff for training and stuff.
Oh, I mean, we try to. I mean, I have a lot of road time because the RAO is 10,000 acres, so it's huge. I mean, my QMA is 400. His QMA is 500. I mean, we're always on the road, always. So for us to take time to like Skype is pretty difficult. Like, if we're gonna do some training, we have to actually sector off a day or two just to get some adequate training in. Um, Otherwise, it's like the morning brief, a quick 30-minute blurb on how we can improve something. Just doing what we can to train and improve. But yeah, just trying to use all the tools we have at our disposal, and to make sure that we make mission right.
Wow. So it's really just the two of you in the office every day. Like, bro, okay, what did we do
He's
yesterday? How do we do better today?
He's not even in my office. He's an hour and a half away from me.
Oh, he's in a PCS?
Yep.
Bro, hold on a minute. So hold on. So you're a staff in COIC and a recruiter,
Yep.
and he's your recruiter an hour and a half away.
Yes.
So you spend the whole day by yourself.
Yes. I mean, I get
Bro,
out of
get the hell out of here. If you don't listen to me, if your commanding officer, your RI, or somebody listens to this podcast, you need to get a Navy comm, because I could not do 3 years on this duty by myself.
I mean, like we make it happen. You know, I mean, we're Marines and
No,
we're
I listen. I agree it, and I believe that I would make it happen too. But that doesn't change the fact that you're doing something short of a miracle, or if not a miracle. God, wow.
well, don't get me wrong. Like, I am out of this office as much as possible and in a school
Oh
because,
yeah, I would never be in the office. Like I wouldn't even own an office. I would lose the keys.
yeah, I mean, because you know, like when I got here in August, um, AC here is terrible. There's no real solid place to AC, so I was in the office a lot, and it felt like a prison. As soon as those schools opened up, oh my goodness, I was in there because you can't sit in a building by yourself. It just gets to you. It grinds your mind. Um, so yeah, I'm in a school every day as much as possible.
Yeah, dude, I was saying that today. Like I work now, and I work some days from home, but some days I work in the office, and I'm in a little cubicle. I'm in a room, and there's no windows, and I walk in at 8 and I leave at 4, and there's no windows in the whole entire building.
Mm-hmm.
So like I literally, like when I walk out of my office, I'm just like, oh my god, like
Mm-hmm.
and the whole, like I feel you know what I mean. So I don't know, I would not. That's crazy. So what are so I guess what I know you had said earlier that like NWAs and stuff like was an issue, like committals. So what are some of the issues that you've had that you've learned on your own to be able to overcome? And then what are some things that maybe you need help with, or some things that maybe you think you could work on?
That's kind of a tough question, um, but I guess when it time management, I think would be a big one. I've always been good at time management, but coming here, taking on the roles of recruiter and a staff NCOIC, plus having an AO of 10,000 acres, was I went from overcoming hills and hurdles of time management to now looking at Mount Everest and asking myself, how am I going to section this off and make it so my time is actually effective? Um, so I would say time management for sure. And I think how I've learned to mitigate the wasting of time or unproductive time is, every time I'm driving to a school, because my farthest school is an hour and a half away, and stop at every gas station, set up a take one stand, talk to the clerk. Don't even talk about the Marine Corps. Just have a cultural conversation, introduce yourself, and say, hey, how's everything going? And maybe the third time you talk to them, like, hey, I actually have a cousin or a brother or a boyfriend who isn't doing anything, and I think the military might be a good option. Would you talk to them? And like I've had appointments that way, but just doing everything you can to mitigate the wasting of time. Like when I come into the office, my personal phone goes in the desk because I can't afford that distraction. Unless I'm DCing on Instagram or something like that, it's in the desk. And um, you know, like going on social media and just scrolling through and looking at stuff can be a huge time waster because before you know it, you just spent 30 minutes doing that, and
Mhm.
that's 30 minutes you could be that's 30 minutes that you could be crunching your numbers to see where you're effective and not effective. And
Yeah.
I think that's
So now
huge.
is that sorry to interrupt you. Is that something that you've learned on your own?
Yes.
Like you've just noticed that on my own, like, okay, hey, I need to focus. And I guess you're in a different world than most because you're a recruiter and you're your own staff at COIC.
Yeah,
So
my
you're
boss.
just like you're looking at yourself like, hey man, like because when you look at the numbers, you can't be like, hey, Staff Sergeant Reinhold, you didn't make your TCs today, and then it's like, wait a minute, you didn't make your TCs today, like you know what I mean?
When we're having that conversation, I just have a mirror in front of me and just like going back and forth. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
just kidding.
No, yeah, no, I get it. Like I can imagine that, like in an office, that'd be a funny, like a funny recruiting video. Like it's just like, "Hey, staff sergeant, what the hell are you doing?" And then it's you over here, and you're just like, because bro, that's exactly what's going on. And then I can only imagine your command. They're also like, I can only imagine they're trying to be understanding of you being a staff and excuse me, they're trying to be understanding of you being a staff in COIC, but they're also trying to be understanding of you being a recruiter because they're like, hey, he's got to do the 7 duties, responsibilities, and he has to find his contracts.
Hmm.
So like, I feel like, wow, man, I feel like that's a whole world of craziness going on right now.
And I'm happy you mentioned the command because, like I said before, I have a great command. They completely understand. Like they're doing, when I say everything that they can to try and make my life as bearable as possible, they really are. Um, there's times where they really could have face and just wrecked me, but they're not because they understand that I'm trying, my recruiter's trying, and we're just doing everything we possibly can to be effective recruiters and contribute to the team, and not just be up here, wallowing in pity, saying, looking at our circumstances and just letting it get to us. Because the only way we're going to get better is to actually. And is our situation maybe a little unique? Yeah, it could be, but if we just sit in the chair and say, "Oh, this sucks," it's never going to get better, and it's just going to be 3 years of pain.
Bro, that's so true. And I'm glad that you bring it up, man, because and I've had episodes about this before, like just with the idea of positive mental toughness, right? Like that because it's reality, and that's something that you're taught at a young age in the Marine Corps, at a young rank, at a young age, and it's something that like really does matter because if you're making the excuses every day on why you can't be successful, well,
Mm-hmm.
then you're making the excuses, and it was like I was listening to a podcast earlier today, um, by the guest on there was this guy JP Donnell. He was a Navy SEAL, and that's what he talks about. Is he calls it attacking complacency, and he's like, dude, like there's so many times that I get lazy to the point where I will not do anything.
Mm-hmm.
And he's like, but I have to remind myself that I'm just creating excuses. And a lot of times the only reason why I'm failing is because I'm allowing myself to fail and I'm creating reasons to fail. I'm creating excuses. And he was just like, bro, at the end of the day, like if you're not fighting against complacency every day,
Mm-hmm.
then there's an issue because every day it's and he's a Christian, and he was talking about the devil, and he was talking about how complacency is the devil and how the devil is just constantly trying to get in your way to keep you from being productive,
Mm-hmm.
and how we allow ourselves to become complacent and we allow ourselves to not add anything to the mission. And
Yeah.
he was like, if you know what the mission is but you keep putting barriers in front of yourself, then it's not that you're failing because you're trying. You're failing because you're creating these barriers that weren't even there in the first place.
Yep.
And that's a lot of what happens on this duty. A lot of people do that. A lot of people, and again, like I said before, before you even get out here, people are causing you to have mental blockage
Mm-hmm.
before you even get out here. People are like, hey, the duty sucks, 8412 sucks, the command sucks, they're out to get you. And like you said, when you came out here, that this was this interpretation that you had, and
Mm-hmm.
then you found out no, that's actually the complete opposite.
Yep. Because if you
And that sorry.
because if you as a recruiter fail, they fail. Like
Yeah.
they don't want that. But also just to let you know, my phone battery is at 10%.
Okay.
I'm in case we get disconnected.
No, I got you. I was gonna go just for like 5 more minutes because we're about to hit an hour anyways.
Okay.
But okay, so in wrapping it up, definitely, and I definitely want to do another episode when you're like halfway through, because
Mm-hmm.
I haven't done it yet with anybody, but I kind of want to chronicle the 3 years of somebody being on the duty so we
Mm-hmm.
can talk. And especially this would be a phenomenal one because first of all, I didn't even know there was RSSs that were only 2-man RSSs. I didn't know that was a thing. Like that's crazy.
Yeah.
Is there a lot of you? Like is in your RS, is that a common thing?
No, I am the only one.
Oh wow. Dude, you must love going to all hands when you get to go. Like you must love being able to see another Marine in uniform.
You have no idea.
Ah, bro, dude, you were in my prayers, bro. If you ever need to just hit me up and just vent about anything, I don't care. Please call me. Dude, I give you all the credit in the world, man. So I guess lastly, one of the questions that I would just ask is, what advice do you have for anybody that is on their way out to the duty?
um, be humble. You know, just because you were great at your job in the fleet and considered an outstanding Marine, like this duty will humble you. And if you come out here humble, it'll be much easier. Be a much easier transition. You know, don't listen to the people that are naysayers and say that this duty sucks. You know, come out here expecting it to be hard, but knowing that you have the potential to make it something that is beneficial to you and literally every single person you talk to. Um, and, you know, just maintain that positive mental attitude and just learn as much as you can while at recruiter school and retain the science of MC3 and then start applying your own art to it as soon as you hit the streets.
Bro, and to as some may say, caveat off that. Um, I think a huge thing is that we don't care enough at BRC.
That's true.
Like I think it's a huge thing, and if anybody listens to this whole podcast, listen to this in closing, is you BRC is about to be the education you get for the next 3 years.
Yep.
Those instructors are there to instruct. You better take every hour of their time. You
Mm-hmm.
better take every moment of their time, every fiber of their being to understand MC3 as much as you possibly can.
Mm-hmm.
Because, if, and in my mind, and listen, I of course, everybody thinks that things can be different and better. But my thing is that I think that with BRC, I feel like there's not enough practical application.
Oh,
Like
100%.
in my mind, all the other stuff, waivers, doing, 680, 2807, Chris, whatever you learn, in my mind, your 3 months of being at BRC should literally be MC3.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know why we take so much time on everything but MC3.
Yeah.
Like, dude, you think about it. Like when you do an interview presentation, you do one attempt. And then half the time you don't even do a full interview. You
Yep.
don't, like when you're getting tested on these things, you don't do a full interview. You do what, maybe one benefit tag, and then you'll do, you'll a little bit of an, you'll do the MC3 skills and stuff, and you'll do enabling and exploring and whatever. But you're not going through a whole entire 45. And I understand, but realistically, if we think about it, right? How many people were in your class? Were in your instructor's class? What was it? 12 people?
40.
No, in the one class.
Yeah.
Oh wow, okay. But so clearly you're not going to have everybody do an hour long presentation because that's 40 hours, right? But in my mind, it's like we don't focus enough on MC3 and because the thing is, like, yourself, you were put into an RSS 4.5 hours away from your RS, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you literally only had what you got from BRC.
Mm-hmm.
So now you're literally sitting in front of an interview and you don't even know what the hell you're doing. You have no idea.
Yeah.
You've never seen what a good interview looks like at this point. And I think that's the part of it, is that because when you're in school, they don't even show you, what a good interview looks like.
Mm-hmm.
You're just like, hey, you're gonna go do this. Hey, go practice in your room, do a little bit of role play, and then that's it. It's
Yeah.
like, no.
and everything is a yes. You know, there's no no's. It's not
Yeah.
realistic.
Yeah. There's no no's. No one's like, hell no. No, you don't have a mom come walking in. Like, no,
Yeah,
man.
like first benefit.
Like,
Hell yeah, let's do this.
no, yeah, man. I definitely think that BRC in my mind, and I would love to have a BRC instructor on here one day. I'm gonna have one of my buddies is retiring, so and he was a BRC instructor, so I'm hoping to get him on. But I just think that we definitely I think they need to spend more time on MC3 skills, closing. Like, dude, you could do even if you just did an entire day
Hmm.
of closing, of rebuttal, of non-committals, of soft sales, of follow-ups. Like a lot of this stuff is just error. And 9 times out of 10, you don't learn it until like a year in. Like a year in, you're like, oh, okay. All
Yeah,
right. I'm finally an amateur. Like
yeah,
it's like, you know what I mean? Like a year in, you're like, oh, I figured some of my stuff out. And then the new guy checks in and you're looking at him like, hey man, you got about a year and a half before you figure it out.
hmm
And it's so would you say that you've kind of got it figured out 8 months in? Like, what are your thoughts?
I would say so. Maybe not figured out, but I have a good grasp, and I'm on a good path to figuring it out. I think repetitiveness and then being able to analyze yourself is huge. Like,
Mm.
for me, like as a recruiter, who does an IOF on me? You know, literally,
That is a phenomenal question.
yeah. Like my recruiter, I have him do IOFs on me. Like I'm like, hey, buddy, I know you're my recruiter, but I just need you to watch and tell me what you think I can improve on. And
But you know what though? That speaks volumes about you. That speaks volumes about you because there's other people in this world, no matter how bad they are, they wouldn't allow that to happen.
mhm,
They would literally be like, I'm the staff at COIC and I'm my own staff at COIC. So the only person that I have to answer to is me. And they
mhm,
would never even allow that Marine or that other recruiter to do an IOF on them. So that right there speaks volumes because you're explaining, and like you said earlier on in the beginning, you're having that conversation. Like this Marine understands, like, hey, like you're like, dude, I just got out here, dude, man. Like we're literally learning how to do this together. Like we're learning how to do this together, and I love that. I want to number one thank you for this opportunity. I appreciate you taking this time out. I hope your staff in CIC is not bothered by this. um but hey man, again, thank you so much for coming out. I definitely want to do a part two, part three. And then if you have any questions, man, if you ever need me to run an IOF on you, man, let's do is I'll be right there, dude. Let's go. But seriously, man, if you have any questions or anything that you want me to cover on like a future episode, maybe to help you out from someone else's perspective, definitely let me know. Thank you so much for coming on. Thank you so much for taking time out of your day. And that's all I got, unless you have anything you want to leave us with.
that's it. Just thank you for having me, and yeah, hopefully this discussion, this podcast, helps somebody out. And yeah, just thank you for
All
having me.
right. All right. Thanks a lot, brother. Have a good rest of the night.
You too. Bye.
All right.